Can I just interject that it
Go ahead.
took a global pandemic, a 35% drop in the stock market,
Mm-hmm.
and a federal lockdown to bring Trump's economy down to President Obama's high water mark.
Yes, I love that. That's a wonderful observation. If I were him, I would come up with this new slogan: "Make America Great Again, again." Right? Try to remember that. Hey, everybody. Here's Dave coming to you from the Hobo Dojo, and I want to introduce you to my friend Annie here. Are you there, darling?
I am. Hi.
You're high.
You're inviting me.
I asked you not to come high. You said
well,
high.
You know,
She has this
time.
issue.
We all self-medicated in our own way.
So I just we're trying out this Zoom format for all of those of you who are watching out in TV land, if indeed we post this. And so I can hear you fine. You look great. And how is it going with you and your whole family? You have how many kids?
I have 3 kids.
3 kids.
It's going actually surprisingly well. And I think that at the core, we're not hugely worried at this juncture about finances because I have been in school and my husband's working and his job has now become remote, and that's a huge load. What's interesting is that I have grown kids. So there would have been no other reason for them all to be living at home. They're all usually off doing their things. So it's kind of interesting to have us all at home.
Oh, so they're all at home with you at this.
On gas, but the food bill is through the roof. I've got 2 grown sons.
Oh, I know you do it. And they're athletes.
Well, my oldest is, and they eat like you would not believe. So
are you?
It's all going well. I'm getting quite restless, though.
I have a couple of questions for you. So you've just finished your degree in something and you had a new job coming up. I know this from last time we talked.
Yeah.
And is that on hold?
Well, I was required to do 6 months of an on-site clinical externship. So, and that is to prepare me from all the book learning to the actual application of cardiac sonography. So I worked for my first 3 months of externship, and then there were no patients. And then of course, government requirements became so stringent, they just didn't want anyone in the clinic. And all of my classmates who were working either in clinics or hospitals have been dismissed temporarily. So no, I am no longer in the clinic, and I am
well, that's a very
for the next week.
Well, I'm glad that everything's all right. And whoever is making that noise in the background, just throw something at them.
Just go, except it's her house.
They come through. I've been hearing this from so many people. I have a lot of different nurses and things that are on my social media feed. In fact, I'm going to talk to one of them later today. She's an RN, and she has she and another RN have just told me they can't get any hours. They are just cut down to nothing.
Well, I think what's happening, and the reason that I feel like I can speak to that with some insight isn't because of my personal experience, but because my best friend is a physician who works downtown in Good Samaritan Hospital. Right. And that hospital is uniquely positioned for the homeless population. A huge amount of its patients come out of the homeless population. So every day I'm asking her, how many patients do you have in the ICU? How many patients do you, and what I'm getting back is that there are under 30 patients that are COVID-19 patients, and that includes COVID suspected, because obviously they treat them differently. So there's a COVID-19 pod, then there's the regular ICU. And the protocols are shifting as they're gathering more data on the ground. And now they're saying that older patients over 60, 65, who get ventilated have a higher percentage chance of dying. So they're stopping, intubating them for whatever reason. But anyway, she feels that things have plateaued in her world, in the downtown Los Angeles hospital, that there's unlikely to be a huge surge in the next few weeks, and that the numbers look like they might be lower than expected. Which is I find myself in the odd position of having argued with some
with some people online who do believe that there's going to be this enormous surge. And I don't see it. And the curve is available to see on all the different statistic websites, and it's almost as flat as a pancake, way down there at the bottom, while New York's is still pretty high, but starting to go back down.
And the whole point of the curve was for the healthcare resources, not for the wider level of infection.
Well, yeah, but this is the curve based on actual cases. So either or. I mean, the governor just sent back 500 ventilators to the National Reserve. So, I mean, it can't be that we're really expecting all that much of a thing. But they get very, very angry with me, and I'd say, look, I'm rooting for fewer causes. I'm social distancing. I mean, I'm wearing my mask here and completely being isolated. So I'm not saying anything like it's like I'm speaking in favor somehow of the illness. And I
what
say
are they
basically
irritated with you about? What is the root of their irritation?
Yes, well, they feel like if I publish something that says, look, your chances of dying in California are 1 in 100,000 at this point. They go, how dare you? Not because basically they think if I do anything other than to frighten people, they're going to just run wildly into the streets. So this is
all you're doing is asking questions. And I think that I've seen a number of people getting smacked. And for what? Asking questions that make the listener uncomfortable. It hurts my feelings. I'm worried about my granddaughter.
Yeah.
And I, of course, rose up and said, keep asking questions, keep analyzing data, because I mean, Galileo made people uncomfortable and he was imprisoned. Is that what we want to be?
We never see him anymore.
That's saying science, science, science.
Like suddenly Galileo's not even in the news anymore. Like, where did he go? It's all Neil deGrasse Tyson and like hardly any Galileo. What's going on?
Well, it's the groupthink. But are you a little bit surprised? Well, first, I have two questions. Are you a bit surprised by the willingness of so many people to unthinkingly do what they're told and not analyze the data themselves? That's my first question. And my second question would be, you have a pretty broad base of people that enable you to get a sense of what sort of the cultural zeitgeist is. I sense a restlessness, or I sense a change in this. Do you feel that there is a marked difference between how people respond to this pandemic that is based on factors like political leanings, whether or not they have loved ones in the healthcare industry, whether or not they have loved ones who are particularly vulnerable in terms of health?
Yes, I feel like it is pretty much right down the standard divisions that we've been seeing all along. Is that the people that I know on the left, and I have many friends on the left, they feel like there is nothing that can be asked of us that is too great. Crash the economy? Okay. We'll stay in our homes and not see our friends for another 6 months? Fine. They're okay with any amount of that, because either so great is their level of panic, or so great is their desire to do the opposite of what conservatives tend to do. And we are, I'm a conservative, and I'm skeptical by nature. I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, look, okay, well, of course, almost all of the cases in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are based out of people that are coming out of the city and into the suburbs. So really, it's New York City, it's a city issue, it's a density issue. And this idea that we should be shutting down Kansas and Utah.
Wyoming, with 4 tested cases.
So we look at something like this and we think, well, what do you mean shut the whole economy down? And there's been a lot of reason that they want the economy to fail anyway, for green reasons. They've been trying to talk us into cutting way, way back and all riding bicycles and all living more simple life. But they've wanted for many years to slow down the economy as it is. That's what I've noticed, is they are perfectly willing to do everything to stop this thing entirely, and conservatives are less willing to do absolutely everything.
Right.
Go ahead.
Going from the micro to the macro, I see in the micro, I see people that it doesn't bother me if an individual very much wants to take all of necessary precautions. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
What bothers me is being very comfortable bullying other people into doing that for the common good, or being very comfortable with employing the force of the state to make it happen. On a macro level, I look and I say, why do these two groups of people, what are the underlying philosophies into which they buy that would then motivate a completely different response? You and I are philosophically very similar, right? We don't believe that big government can solve all the problems.
Right.
We just don't. Our answers for what might be solutions may differ, but ultimately we do not invest government with as much power.
Right.
On the left, however, they're increasing sort of clamoring for greater government interference on every level, makes it's obvious, or it's understandable now, that they would bow down willingly. And I have pointed out to some of these people that, you know, you are the first people to complain about politicians' greed and politicians' corruption and all this. Why are you willing to give them more power? One.
Yes.
And why are you then willing to give them more power over you personally? And if you are also an advocate of hard science, how are you so willing to then not take into account hard scientific data, or even analyze it in an open-minded way?
Right. Exactly. Like, for instance, I keep telling people, look, that the data is about numbers of deaths, numbers of cases per million. That is the thing we're not looking at. So they want to say, well, you know, look how much more cases we have than Italy. So obviously this thing is growing wildly, but you got to go cases per million. And you got to understand that almost all of our cases are in New York or other dense cities. And I think one of the real, that seems to be a particular sticking point with people. They want to think, well, the reason that California is doing so well is that it's because of these draconian measures. And so they're seeing, so we got to ramp up this stuff. Now we got to not allow people to visit their families. Now we got to do all this stuff because we got to keep
public
doing
parks,
right.
Arrest the paddle boarder who's 200 meters offshore, making me crazy.
Exactly. But Florida held off for a long time, and they haven't had an explosion because they say that New York had the explosion because they waited too long. And now we'll have a similar explosion. And Eric Garcetti has been promising this to the citizens of Los Angeles for weeks and weeks. He keeps going,
let me ask you something else.
New York, that's us next week. He keeps saying that.
Why on earth does Garcetti not allow, I mean, in every other venue of our lives, the government will say voluntarily, this is what we want you to do. These are the guidelines, right? It's not an absolute mandate. It's not a mandatory action. Right. And that's where I draw the line. Yet, if you are that compromised, stay at home. If you absolutely cannot go out to the beach, stay at home. Absolutely. But for those of us who are healthy, to say that there's a mandatory, temporary law in place, I think Garcetti is out of his mind, and Newsom too, with the power to now restrict Californians. And I don't know how long it's going to last, because I think people are starting to get a little pissed off.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Do you think we're headed for some kind of revolt?
I'm not sure revolt is the right word. The way I see it is that most people early on were very much willing to voluntarily do what was asked of them to prevent the spread. Slowly, the voices that were sort of that drumbeat of negativity that was inevitable against predominantly Trump, despite Newsom's vocal support of his actions and his cooperation with the federal government, that didn't take long before it started to be heard in the background. Now my sense is that more and more people are saying the economic collapse and the misery and the poverty that will result from it will be worse than the disease. And when I keep coming forward, and I said, I haven't looked at the numbers, but yesterday it looked like 23,000 roughly United States deaths, 23,000. Over the course of a typical flu year, you've got 20 to 60,000 people dead every year in this country. Right. So I am unwilling at this juncture to get all upset about the death rate if we're in April and it's 23.
And Fauci and Birx's most recent numbers, they keep, I mean, at first they came way, way down after Neil Ferguson, who did the Imperial study in England, came back and really cut his numbers down. And Birx was straightforward enough to bring that to the American people at the presser and say, well, now we're looking at a greater, smaller number. And then a few days later, they found some other models and they went back up again. And what I think it is, I think that probably Fauci and Birx are both liberals. I think they are both academics. And so I think what they think is that there are the smart people and then most people are really dumb. We know that they think that conservatives are stupid. So, but I think that they probably think that most of their own people also need to be incredibly frightened.
Well, there are 2 points. First, I think you have to remember that I don't know their politics, and I'm not sure that they are necessarily leaning on their philosophies at this juncture. My point would be, first of all, they're working off flawed data. Everybody understands that the data coming out of China starting in December was flawed. Right. So those models were going to be flawed. Secondly, as scientists tasked with providing the president data upon which he will make policy, they are much more comfortable erring on the side of, okay, look what this model shows me. Right. I can back it up. I mean, in entertainment, okay, I've been working in entertainment for many years. It doesn't matter that this script sucks and this script is good. If the script that sucks was written by a guy or a gal who's actually made money for the company in the past. You don't have so you have to be able to tell your boss at the end, I chose this script and here's why. And regardless of how it performs, if you have a solid reason why, you're in the clear. And I think that attitude, more than sort of fear mongering or all that, because they want to be right, but they have to be able to back it up. And when I talk about Fauci, I look at this guy and I think, first of all, as it's been said, he has not made a career out of being right. Go back to SARS, go back to MERS, go back to even January when he was saying that there is very little worry, that very little reason to worry for the United States. If everything you have is a hammer, and you're only tasked with giving it, we're never going to shake hands again. Excuse me. I mean, why don't we just never come out of our homes again? I know you can take it to a place that's absolutely ridiculous. And there will be a fragment of the population that will go, oh, that makes perfect sense.
One of the things that is very interesting, because we are teasing around whether people are coming from a political place or are not, I think that we are coming from a place of natural skeptic or collectivist mind. So, but we could set that aside for now. And
but also bear in mind, Dave, if the collectivist mind position undermines the president and makes it harder for him to get elected, that's sort of the shadowy backstory.
What this is where I'm going with this is we have this sort of sainted figure on the left who is Anthony Fauci. They want us to go with the models, but President Trump has been going with the models.
And they have been wrong.
And so what is President Trump is not known to be a light spender. I mean, you don't become an international playboy dating supermodels because you're stingy. And now that he has a couple of trillion extra dollars laying around that's not actually his, he seems, he is as big a spender as a Republican as one could possibly imagine. Sorry to all our Trump fans out there. I voted for him. I intend to vote for him again, but he's not known to be a small and very stingy spender. So I think that they are working this thing in a way with him so that they can get all these extra things and get all this extra spending done. But I don't know exactly how this plays out for the upcoming election cycle, because how are they really going to blame this on Trump if in fact he went with them according to their models, according to Fauci and everything all along the way?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. So I don't think dumping on him is going to be a problem, because you can always compare him, as they do to America at large. You can always compare him to your fantasy model who would have done it so much better. And he'll always look poorer by comparison. Right. So, I mean, and I think, but the larger sort of picture has to include, well, who's he running against?
Because it's not a fantasy model.
It's right. That's all makes all the difference. And again, this utopian America, I don't know how any of them would have done any better or any different. Although I'm almost convinced that none of them would have shut flights from China quite as early as President Trump did. And of course, he's riding that horse in virtually every press conference, right? He's reminding the public.
He is, but they're not watching him. They're not watching him. This is what's so weird about this. And when I was a liberal, I'm sorry for those who didn't know that, but I was a liberal for a very long time. The fact is, I just never heard anything from the other side of it. If I wouldn't listen to one of their presidents, I would listen only to our president. And so what they're doing is, instead of listening to Trump, they're listening to Mario Cuomo. And he gives them a very New York-centric view of things and a very liberal-centric thing. He comes out and he puts out all the New York factoids and all the American.
They're swooning, Dave.
And then he does this thing about, it's important that we believe, that we understand that this is our strength. We pull together. And he gives them all the warm, huggy stuff, and they get off. He doesn't say anything like, it's going to be a really tough time rebuilding. Let's think seriously about how we can get back to work.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything about that.
But in his defense, I mean, that's not really his job at this juncture. I mean, maybe Trump will say, look, it's up to the states. He'll kick that can down the road. I don't know. I'm not sure that would be wise.
My point is that he's servicing that sort of liberal, like they're doing a lot of stuff right now. I happen to know several hundred folk singers, as many of you know. And if you're looking for a sort of nicely packaged view of what a progressive is, have a folk singer come over, because they'll put it to music and they'll give you the whole thing, because they've been touring around the country for many years, playing to audiences of progressives, and they've tuned their message very carefully.
So all we need is love. The misery will be abated by if we just put our arms around each other.
And so they're all on this format and on Facebook Live and stuff, singing to each other and talking about how we're all pulled together by being separate. They almost act as if they're going through some sort of mass spiritual awakening worldwide right now.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Like somehow we're all going to get to the place where we're all so equally broke that we will all join hands. And
well, maybe one of the interesting consequences or trends that will be in place after the pandemic is that it sort of distills people's role in society. And folk singers aren't depended upon to make policy. They are depended upon to draw on common emotion and set it into music.
Yes.
And a common sort of humanity. And so I can't fault them too much for wanting to draw us all together in our suffering. I mean, I think the problem is that you get to like it too much.
Right.
And so you want to engender it a little.
Well, and the economy can drift a very long way while you are reassociating yourself with your kindness every day. I mean, they don't see wanting to preserve the jobs of literally hundreds of thousands of businesses, probably more, who are a dad, a mom, a couple of kids. They serve a community. These are not corporate. And what the weird thing is that they don't seem to have any problem with. They're killing the small businesses, the mom and pop people.
The ones they pretend to support.
Yes. And who can survive this? Corporate America.
While we're dinging the left, let me
but we love them.
One thing that was absolutely shocking to me, because I don't think the people who were reading and responding recognized what was going on. Essentially, someone had posted an article complaining that while other hotels in the world have been donating hotel rooms to the cause for this pandemic, Trump and his properties have not been open to the public. And of course, I almost lost it, because here I did a long list of all the things that Trump has done. But because he hasn't virtue signaled by doing one tiny, tiny little thing, which would have no measurable impact, because truly the pandemic is not expanding because there aren't enough luxury hotel rooms available. That because he's not virtue signaling, he's getting bashed. And nobody seems to recognize how empty and vapid and stupid and petty and revealing that is.
Well, it really is, though, a lot of what the left is based on is signaling. They're not based on results. I mean, everything virtually that they do ends up having this unintended consequence that comes from every time you craft a legislation that utterly ignores human nature and say, everybody wants to work, everybody does this, so let's just give everybody a lot of money, and that'll make them feel confident and loved, and then they'll begin to work spontaneously because everybody wants to work. The opposite is true. A lot of people, if you're going to give me money, I ain't going nowhere. I'm going to stay home.
I have a lover called Mr. Netflix, and that's where I'll be.
Exactly.
You know?
But we understand that about human nature. I mean, I spend most of my time trying to defeat my own laziness in some way. Because
well, we all have to fight against our natures that way. But, you know, I do think that I know that you're going to want to wrap this up, that when the pandemic—
I'm not in a great big hurry, whenever.
When the pandemic actually does start to level off and slowly the country is opened, I predict that the rhetoric, the political rhetoric, is going to be uglier than we have seen it in a very long time. And I'm almost ready to withdraw because I get so, irritated by misinformation.
Well, tease that out a little bit. Like, give me a, just kind of imagine what happens at, say, the end of May. Like, imagine where we are, and then imagine how that affects the political rhetoric.
Well, I think that everything dating from the State of the Union, and I remember hearing someone recently say that Trump actually did mention this Chinese virus in the State of the Union. I don't remember, but
they were busy impeaching him.
I think that just judging from if the past is any indication of future behavior, that there will be all kinds of memes and graphs and narratives designed to spin Trump as being a combination of monstrosities: too slow, too racist, not willing to listen to his experts, anything that, with the hydroxychloroquine, when he touted that as a possible
impersonating a physician.
Right? I'm sorry?
He was impersonating a physician.
He was, and it was all anecdotal anyway, right? Then when it became clear after several weeks that it actually did work, and, I told you that my best friend works in a Good Samaritan, they use it. With great efficacy, right, down in downtown hospitals, and it works great if it's used early enough.
Right.
So once they realize that it really does work and it's being used very commonly, then the narrative spun so that Trump was gaining sort of financial advantage by promoting this. And that has been, so these are the kinds of petty things that I anticipate coming up. He doesn't open his own hotel rooms. He's doing everything only to amass his own fortune, because I guess you need more.
Right.
He's too slow. He is obnoxious. He did not allow the press free access. All these things. Do I think they will have an effect? I think that they will remain fairly confined to that percentage who already believe it, who believed it before. I have someone in my life who is pretty middle of the road, and he is my bellwether, and he is my canary in the coal mine. And so I ask him, because he doesn't respond quite as reflexively conservative as I do, or as liberally as others do. And I ask him quite openly, so how do you think the media is treating that? How do you think this is going? And he's furious. He can see absolutely the spin on the various stations. And he's like, whatever just happened to factual reporting? Whatever happened to truth seeking, as opposed to, looking for fodder, looking to goad the president into saying something that they can then mock? Well,
and I think you get to a point there that I have made a number of videos saying this, to the consternation of some of our fan base out there, that I think we'd be much better off if we had moderate liberals and moderate conservatives pretty much engaged in full-time conversation, so that we pull each other each way, and so that you're talking with somebody who is not absolutely dead set against everything you say, but they're pulling you in one way or the other according to their sort of way of viewing the world. And in the same way that you would not choose a marriage partner as a duplicate of yourself, but of somebody who levels you a little bit, who pushes back against you a little bit, and forces you to actually make the best decision long term, rather than just winning your
the most comfortable one. Yeah.
And so if we look at that, I think that that is maybe one advantage we may get out of this in the end, that we'll see, oh my God, look at how immoderate people were in their responses to this. We need to be moderate in our responses to this. And I think it's been wise of Donald Trump ultimately that he has not kind of stuck to the idea that we all had, including Anthony Fauci at the very beginning, that this is not going to be any big deal.
Right.
He acknowledged that it was pretty bad. Probably better that he is a New Yorker than a Los Angeles Republican, in which case he might have tended to underplay it. He was.
Do you think that in the end he will come out of this, for the most part, being perceived as someone who handled it well?
I think the moderates will look at him and say, yeah, I wouldn't vote for him necessarily if I had another choice, but I think that I'm just voicing what a moderate would think, right. A moderate left-wing person. But in fairness, he tried very hard. In fairness, he did stop the travel. And in fairness, he brought us Anthony Fauci and Birx and put them out every single day. Yeah. He did help them to establish these guidelines. And I think that many people will look at him and say, maybe we haven't given this guy his fair due. What do you think?
Well, I'm trying to imagine
just moderate liberals I'm talking about
that would be foisted upon this country during this pandemic if Hillary Clinton had won the election. And as a praying woman, right, I do have a prayer of gratitude that she did not every day. So, and again, it's a fool's game because there's no way of really measuring. But I think that much will depend on how quickly the economy rebounds. That will be the determining factor as to whether he was mediocre or above average. I think a case can be made that he did not fail. In the time of greatest need for both leadership and active policymaking, he did not fail. So I think that he's safe at this juncture about that.
And that he was surprisingly nonpartisan. He really,
he's so accustomed to bringing the limelight back to himself all the time. I mean, it's a personality tick. It's not his most endearing quality.
Right.
It's one that most of us just overlook. But I think that he trumpets quite frequently his cooperation with Newsom, with Cuomo, and their congratulatory and sort of cooperative comments as well. And they've been quite open in their gratitude to him. Right. So I think that once, even if it is a platformed opening, like a movie, if it's a slow, gradual opening, even then, I think that if things ramp up quickly, as my people in the know seem to think it will, then he will come out of this with an above average rating.
I think you're right. And so we got to wrap this up pretty soon. I know you have a busy day, but I can't resist asking you one more thing. Do you think they're really going to put Biden up, or is there a backroom thing going on with Tom Perez over there at the DNC to, I don't know, if I could see if they were going to try to put somebody else in, it would probably be Cuomo.
But Biden has put himself in a real corner with this promise to nominate a minority woman as his running mate.
Right.
So, and that I think he did in January. I mean, I think that Democrats, prior to the pandemic, I think they kind of realized there was no way that any politician was going to be, neither Bernie nor Biden had a chance at beating Trump. And they were just throwing this election away, essentially. At this juncture, the pandemic and the ensuing sort of economic collapse has given them sort of new hope. Obviously, I do think Biden, I never criticize Biden now because I have an enormous
sympathy,
compassion for someone who is in the early stages of dementia. And I honestly believe that is the case with him. Clearly his family needs to take him off the stage. They for whatever reason, they're not doing it. So that means his VP choice is going to be even more critical. If I were a Democrat, I would backtrack on the minority woman promise. Of all the promises to break, that would probably be the easiest one because circumstances have changed so drastically. So I would then begin a hunt for a for someone like Cuomo, who has taken the limelight recently and has lefties swooning right and left.
They really do. And, there is something on the left that, I have a longstanding theory that as people cast off the religion of their youth, which in most cases was Christianity, they were unable to entirely get rid of the idea of salvation. And so they see themselves as, well, I don't believe in Jesus anymore because that wouldn't be collegiate of me. But I do believe in salvation, and Jesus being out of the running, I guess that means me. So they all think of themselves in a sense as Jesus. And so they have a way of having this great love for victims. And if they can have a person who is both a leader and a victim, that's a win-win for them. And I think it's one of the reasons they're always trying to choose somebody of color, Italian Americans don't know that they're about to find out they're people of color, because if they run Cuomo, they're going to have to call him, look at him, look at how he's slightly darker than us. He's a man of color. So, but there is a sense that he's sort of, in our eyes right now in this time, he's sort of a victim king. He's sort of a plague king. And so he's the man that did all he could while everything was dying around him. And he plays to that. He emotes every time he appears. And, his pain is evident. And they love that.
They love that.
It's
as if it's, I can feel your pain.
Well, I guess I don't know. So
I wonder, I don't think, because they always say there's a lot more that can happen between now and the election. But I actually think that there isn't a lot more that can happen that would reveal the leadership and the character and the governing philosophies of President Trump. In other words, he's been forged, and you are getting a known entity.
Right.
And, and I think that when it comes down to breaking a promise among the rabid feminists who are so, angling for a woman VP, I think that they would be easier to assuage, only because that question is, where are they going to go? They're not going to go vote for Trump. Right. So they're kind of stuck. But if I were a Democratic strategist, please never. That would be what I would do, is I would choose probably Cuomo, because he's just been grabbing the limelight the way he has. Nonetheless, he's not an ideal candidate for either position, VP or president, and I don't think they have a shot.
They really are going to be up against it because, as you're saying, people, Trump did rebuild the economy last time, or at least that is the perception. I know that on the left, they tend to think, actually, Obama had a very humble 8-year plan that was meant to go along, and just all of a sudden, the minute he left the White House, it exploded. He's a giver.
He's a giver. That's what they do.
So much, and so this is really Obama's economy.
Yes.
And so that Trump, he ruined Obama's economy. So they'll somehow be
However, can I just interject that it took a global pandemic, a 35% drop in the stock market, and a federal lockdown to bring Trump's economy down to President Obama's high water mark.
Yes, I love that. That's a wonderful observation. And so that ties back with me to complete my point, is that these people do have 401k plans and stuff, and they can't have not noticed how it went up during Trump. And so if I were him, I would come up with this new slogan: "Make America Great Again." Right? And so it's like MAGA again. And so I think that maybe a lot of people will just say, you know what? We saw this guy bring us through a really bad thing. So I guess the question is, what you referred to earlier is, how soon will the economy rebound? And if there are real signs of a rebound by October, I think we're looking at another 4 years of Trump.
Yeah. And that will make it, and that victory will be all the sweeter given the vitriol that we need to brace ourselves to endure in August, September, October.
Yeah. We'll be ready. Well, Annie, it's been wonderful seeing you again. You're one of my favorite people.
Thank you.
And for all of those of you who do not know, we've only ever been in the same room, I believe, 4 times. So we met at a party. We met at a party at the redoubtable Zane Bardwick's house.
Like
and
how many years ago?
He has such great taste in friends, and it has to have been at least 6 years ago, because we met at some point after that for coffee, and then twice more for coffee. So
and then I came to your concert.
Of course, yes, and so do pass my love along to your family, and remind your husband what if he forgets how wonderful he's done in the spouse selection.
Actually, he does say, when is Dave playing again? And we'll come see you.
He's a smart guy. He never forgets.
Thank you.
But anyway, thanks. This is my friend Annie, and Annie, this is the BCL audience.
Thanks.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Very grateful for the time. Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.